You've been to a church, a mosque, a temple, or at least you know someone who goes every week without fail. Maybe you've lit a candle for someone. Maybe you prayed before a flight, before a surgery, before something you couldn't control. Maybe you don't believe in anything and you still found yourself, at some point, talking to something you can't explain. That instinct, reaching towards something larger than yourself in the moments that matter most, where did it come from? Because it's not just you, it's not just your culture, it's not just your era. Researchers have studied over 10,000 distinct human cultures across every continent and every era of history. Not one has been found without some form of spiritual belief. Zero exceptions. Which means this isn't tradition. When something appears in 100% of human cultures with no exceptions, it stops being a cultural habit and starts being something biological. So how far back does it actually go? Further than you think. Here's the first thing that separates humans from every other animal on the planet. We know we're going to die. Not in the vague biological sense that every organism eventually stops functioning. In the specific, conscious, terrifying sense that you can lie awake at 3 a.m. and contemplate your own non-existence. You know it's coming. You can't stop it. Everyone you love will face the same thing. No other animal has this problem. A chimpanzee doesn't lie awake contemplating mortality. A crow doesn't grieve its own future death. In 1973, psychologist Ernest Becker published The Denial of Death. It won the Pulitzer Prize that year. His argument: the awareness of inevitable personal death is the single most powerful driver of human behavior. Everything we build, everything we create, everything we believe is, in some form, a response to that awareness. And burial sites prove it. You don't bury someone with flowers, with tools, with ochre and jewelry, unless you believe, or desperately need to believe, that something continues after the body stops. The oldest evidence for spiritual behavior doesn't come from Homo sapiens. It comes from a species that went extinct 40,000 years ago. Shanidar Cave, northern Iraq, 1960. Archaeologist Ralph Selecki excavates a Neanderthal burial site 60,000 years old. The body is positioned deliberately. Pollen analysis reveals flowers were placed around the burial: yarrow, groundsel, grape hyacinth. A completely separate human species, extinct for 40,000 years, burying their dead with flowers. At other Neanderthal sites, eagle talons with deliberate cut marks worn as jewelry, ochre pigment used in burial rituals, pigment applied to cave walls. Neanderthals and Homo sapiens diverged roughly 600,000 years ago, which means the cognitive architecture for spiritual behavior is at least 600,000 years old. In 1994, archaeologist Klaus Schmidt starts excavating a hill in southeastern Turkey. What he finds completely overturns the history of religion. Göbekli Tepe, a massive complex of circular stone enclosures covered in carved reliefs, foxes, snakes, vultures, scorpions, vultures with human heads, arranged around enormous T-shaped pillars, up to 6 meters tall and 20 tons each. The largest known structure of its time, it dates to 12,000 years ago. Before agriculture, before cities, before pottery, before writing, before everything we call civilization. The people who built it were hunter-gatherers. Schmidt spent 20 years excavating the site before his death in 2014. His conclusion? They didn't build a temple because they had a civilization. They built a civilization because they had a temple. Göbekli Tepe suggests religion didn't emerge from civilization. It created it. The need to gather and build something sacred together may be what drove humans to invent agriculture and permanent settlements. First the temple, then the city. Before any god had a name, before any religion had a text, before writing, before cities, before agriculture, humans were already making offerings. The oldest known evidence of ritual sacrifice dates to at least 400,000 years ago. Sites in Israel and Spain show deliberate, organized animal sacrifice, not for food, not for survival, but arranged in patterns that only make sense as offerings. Something was being given. Something was being asked for in return. At Blombos Cave in South Africa, 100,000-year-old ochre kits, grinding stones, shell containers, red pigment, used not for any practical purpose but for ritual body decoration. At burial sites from Africa to Siberia to the Americas, grave goods appear without exception. Tools, food, jewelry, objects the dead person valued in life. You don't pack someone's belongings for a journey that doesn't exist. At Hohlfels Cave in Germany, archaeologists found a carved ivory figure with a lion's head and a human body. A therianthrope, half animal, half human. The same image appears independently in rock art across Africa, Australia, and the Americas. The same concept, a being that exists between the human world and another world, invented separately, on every continent, thousands of years apart. But why is the human brain so prone to this? Evolutionary psychologist Justin Barrett coined the term hyperactive agency detection device, the HADD. It's a cognitive system evolved to detect agents in the environment, and it's deliberately oversensitive. Because in the ancestral environment, it was far cheaper to assume a line in the grass when there wasn't one than to assume there wasn't one when there was. False positives cost nothing. False negatives cost everything. So the brain evolved to see agents everywhere. Then we turned that system on the entire universe. Thunder sounds like intention. The storm feels like anger. A river seems to want something. The same cognitive mechanism that kept your ancestors alive by seeing predators in shadows started seeing spirits in rivers and gods in storms. The human brain wasn't designed for religion, but religion is almost an inevitable output of a brain designed to detect agents everywhere. The oldest known form of human spirituality, appearing consistently in every hunter-gatherer culture ever studied, is animism. Everything has a spirit. Rivers, animals, rocks, fire, storms. And within every animist culture ever documented, one specialized role appears with a remarkable consistency across cultures that had zero contact with each other. The shaman, the individual who enters altered states through fasting, drumming, sleep deprivation, plant medicines, and mediates between the human world and the spirit world. Shamanism appears in Siberia, the Amazon, Aboriginal Australia, pre-contact North America, sub-Saharan Africa, always different in specific form, always identical in structure. Oxford researcher Ian Morley, in his 2011 analysis of prehistoric religion, identifies shamanism as the oldest spiritual practice in the human archaeological record, possibly 100,000 years old. Around 10,000 years ago, as human groups got larger, the nature of religion shifted in a specific and measurable direction. Ara Norenzayan at the University of British Columbia analyzed religious belief across cultures and published his findings in 2013 in Big Gods: How Religion Transformed Cooperation and Conflict. His conclusion: in small groups of 20 to 50 people, you don't need a moralizing god. Everyone knows everyone. Reputation keeps behavior in check. In a city of 10,000 strangers, that doesn't work. You need someone watching even when no one you know is watching. Moralizing gods, omniscient, punishing deities who care about human behavior, appear consistently as societies scale. The belief that someone is always watching enabled societies that built everything else. The cave paintings at Lascaux in France, Altamira in Spain, show something that goes far beyond decoration. They're not near the entrance, not in the public areas where people cooked and slept. They're deep inside, in chambers that required torches, navigating narrow passages in absolute darkness that almost no one would ever reach. Archaeologist David Lewis Williams spent decades studying cave art and shamanic traditions worldwide. His conclusion: the paintings were made during altered states of consciousness, in the flickering torchlight of deep caves, in sensory-deprived environments that induce hallucinations. The therianthropic figures, half human, half animal, appear in shamanic traditions on every continent. They represent the shaman's journey between worlds, and to get there, they needed to alter their consciousness. 43,000 years ago, in Hohlerfels Cave in Germany, someone made a flute from a vulture bone, the oldest musical instrument ever found. Drumming, music, and rhythmic sound are used to induce trance states in shamanic traditions across every culture ever studied. They weren't making music for entertainment, they were building a door. So here's what the archaeology actually shows. Spiritual behavior predates Homo sapiens. It predates agriculture, it predates language as we know it. Ritual sacrifice 400,000 years ago. Neanderthal burials with flowers 60,000 years ago. A temple built by hunter-gatherers 12,000 years ago, before the first city, before the first farm. The human brain came pre-installed with the systems that make religious thought almost inevitable. An agent detector set to maximum sensitivity. A mind that imagines other minds, including minds larger than human ones. An awareness of death that demands an answer. Every culture, every era, every continent, zero exceptions.